the smell of grass and leather. There were days when we'd play too. We'd cross the lines when the sun would shine and make our dreams come true. I had a glove on my hand and a girl in the stands. She stole my heart like a hit and run. It seems the world was so much simpler back then. We was just out there for fun. I pray for someone to hold your hand and baseball in the summer. Someone to walk with you when this world grows cold. Baseball in the summer. Baseball in the summer.
Welcome to the Brockvmac Legendary Rivals podcast, and we have a Mac cast today with the Beast from the East, Craig Cooper, one of the star players of the McMaster Baseball Marauders. Craig, how are you doing?
I'm great, Mike. Thanks. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, listen, obviously some time will have passed since you've touched base with some of your teammates and obviously all the opponents at Brock. And are you out on the East Coast is I think what everyone is going to want to check in on, and are you living life as a hometown boy again? What are you up to after 30 years?
Yeah, I'm back in Halifax, or just outside of Halifax in a suburb. So I moved back, I'm going to say, almost 18 years ago. Okay. So, back, East Coasters once we leave. I should say I wanted to get out of here as soon as I could when I was young. And then as I, worked in Ontario for a while and a couple other spots, everything would just pull me back to the ocean, I would say. So hard to do corporately or from a career standpoint. You have to have the right opportunities. But when one came up, I jumped at it and couldn't be happier. The East Coast is where it's at from my perspective, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've been joined by thousands of people that during the pandemic fled from Ontario to turn it into a less or more crowded place. Hopefully you're not dealing with the same traffic that I need to deal with being in Toronto. So
I don't think anywhere near what you deal with, but the influx of people here post-COVID, or since COVID, I should say, I mean, it's just been a little ridiculous. And we weren't planning for that. So we didn't necessarily have the infrastructure and all that kind of stuff, and housing, like it is everywhere, is a major, major issue here. But you take the good with the bad, right? Population growth is good. I personally, I love a lot of guys from Ontario across the country, but if I was surrounded by 90% East Coasters, I'd be happy, right? So we have an influx of I call you guys Upper Canadians. I always have. So not a bad thing. Trust me.
Somehow you managed to get Don Graves out there. So, that's...
Donnie lives... so where I grew up an hour south of Halifax in Bridgewater on the South Shore. So Donnie lives, 20 minutes from where I grew up, and probably another 15, 20 minutes from where my parents currently live, where they retired in Green Bay. So pretty ironic that, he is down here now.
Well, as long as he doesn't catch you out past curfew and cause you to run laps, we're all good.
That's right.
So, Craig, why don't we start at the beginning and how you grew up and developed a love for sports and athletics. I think most of us start with that origin story, and it's usually a parent or siblings that drive that. But I know on the East Coast there's a real great sense of community. So a lot of times people are very tied to community-oriented teams and whatnot. Why don't we start there and find out your story before there was McMaster, even the glint of your eye?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in Halifax, moved down to Bridgewater, which I just mentioned, when I was in grade 2. So pretty young. So that's where my parents, as I said, still live very close to. So I had an older brother and a younger sister. My older brother is 3 years older than me. My younger sister is 6 years younger. So me and my brother did a lot of athletics, sports, whatever you want to call it, from baseball to basketball to track to soccer. It was just always part of what we did, right? Back then it was, it's summertime or anytime really. It was the baseball field was across the street from my house, literally, and the basketball courts were 5-minute jog. So we were just always doing that. And between him and his buddies and myself and my buddies, we're just always out doing something, trying to keep out of trouble as much as we could. And yeah, I mean, that's really where it came from. I've just always been an incredibly competitive person. So sports made a lot of sense for me. I just, I've always liked to win. My brother would tell you that from a very, very young age.
So here's a really great question for, people who are ultra competitive, because I might have that same quality. What do you enjoy, winning more, or do you hate losing more? Which is a stronger emotion for you?
Hate losing.
Yeah. It's amazing how many people have that same, it's just despise losing, and then you do anything not to lose, kind of a mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So did you and your brother, play on teams together? When did you start getting into organized sports, and what were they?
Yeah, pretty early in terms of organized sports. So, gosh, I mean, I think I was playing baseball when I was 5 years old. So, I think that's as early, whatever that was. It wasn't T-ball back then, where I grew up just outside of Halifax and Bedford. It was actually softball. But, you learned the basics of the game, and you went from there. And so my brother and I never really played a lot of hockey. I'm not sure why, just kind of our parental influences, I would say. But yeah, it was organized sports from a very young age. My brother was 3 years older. So when I was in grade 9, he was in grade 12, as an example. So we only overlapped once on a team sport. When he was in grade 12, I was able, and I know it's different in Ontario. So 7 to 9 is junior high, and 10 to 12 is high school. So when I was in grade 9, I was able to play on his senior high basketball team, and that was actually the only time we ever played on the same team. Obviously, we played a lot of other, recreational games and stuff like that, and we actually ended up winning provincials and everything else. So it's him and I still reminisce over a couple of bevies when we get together about the good old days, if you will.
Yeah, I think everyone likes to relive a championship or two. Craig, and what positions were you good at, and were you just kind of they put you wherever, or did you have a set position when you were young?
For baseball?
Yeah.
I mean, early on, as every kid, I think I wanted to be a shortstop. Not every kid, but a lot of kids. So yeah, early on. I played a little bit everywhere, I would say, and I pitched a little bit, but I can't remember the exact age. I started playing outfield, and I say outfield, but I started playing center field, and I have never. I'm sure I've played a position outside of that here and there, but I don't think I've ever played any significant time at any other position. I've just always been a center fielder. Yeah.
Best answer ever, because I'm pretty sure if Coach Graves would put you in left, that may have caused you to get a little bit fired up, right?
It may have. You are correct. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I find that center fielders, once they're kind of in that position, they really covet being the guy that's kind of the de facto captain of the outfield, but you're also having to cover two gaps, right? So pretty interesting from that perspective. Did you play like midget and junior organized baseball? Like, I think one of the big differences is, the guys from Ontario are going to understand how sports were organized here. They were, kind of cities would have rep teams, and they would be organized in AAA, AA, and A ball centers. And they played some high school baseball. What about you as you advanced in the sport? What were you playing, and do you have any coaches that stood out, or things that stood out from those days?
Yeah, definitely. So I don't know if we had the same classifications, but it was mosquito, beaver, bantam. Is that the same terminology in Ontario?
But I think
in the day,
bantam, I think is
Yeah, so those three age groups, I guess you will. I played all out of Bridgewater, and we were very competitive. I think we went to Atlantics one year. So you win your provincials, you go to Atlantics. They never had a national scope for that at that time, at least. Um, so I was able to play that in Bridgewater because we had enough kids interested in playing the game. But when I became, I guess, early teens, I had to start to travel to actually play on competitive teams, I guess you would say. So I would travel I played for Bedford, which is essentially Halifax, and Dartmouth. I played. So my junior days, I played in Dartmouth, and midget days, I played in Bedford because that's where the best teams were at the time. And I mean, a coach in Bedford who got me to go up there and recruited me and coached me for years, Ken Lenahan, great guy, knew his baseball, loved his baseball. One of those guys that just dedicated so much of his time and effort to that. Definitely remember him very, very well. Back in Bridgewater, I had lots of impactful people. I'm always hesitant to name any because I don't want to forget anyone, to be honest with you. But the Woodworth family, so Dennis and Sean, were very involved in my baseball careers. The Simone family, Blaine and his father were incredibly instrumental in just supporting me. His father was the president of Bridgewater Baseball, and Blaine coached me. I worked at the ball field for 3 or 4 years, instructing little kids. He was part of that as well. So yeah, lots of people that have definitely impacted and helped helped my career or skills or however you want to call it.
Okay, that's amazing. Now, the obvious question is, if I was sitting you and your brother down over pints, who would claim to be the better baseball player?
Oh, myself, no question. He'd actually give me that one.
Yeah,
He would argue probably. So I played a lot more baseball than my brother. He played a lot of basketball, as did I. But he would argue on the basketball, but he'd lose that argument as well. Again, in my opinion, yeah.
Well, it's at least you solve it philosophically over a pint, which seems very East Coast of you. We had a pair of twins called the Houstons who would fight it out every time. It'd end up with the holes in drywall and stuff. So
yeah, we don't get like that.
No. Craig, as you're kind of nearing, did they have high school baseball on the East Coast, or was that something that wasn't happening? Or was it more softball,
No, we did
maybe?
not. Yeah, they had softball in the spring, I think. Same time as track. I never played it, but never high school baseball.
Okay. And what possesses you to, like, as you're getting close to having to select universities, and did you have like a career path that you had in mind, or tell me about the process of narrowing down what universities you want to get to and why, and how do you end up in Hamilton, Ontario?
Yeah, it's a good story actually. So I did have career aspirations that are completely different than where I am today, which I think happens to a lot of people. But so out of high school, I was really involved or interested, I should say, in kinesiology. So just being athletic and sports related and all that kind of stuff. So I had narrowed down to Dal and McMaster. At the time, they had two of just very good programs, I guess. And Dal obviously being local down the road. But my brother actually went to McMaster. So he strongly influenced me to say, listen, get out of the East Coast, experience some life on your own, grow up, all that kind of stuff. And sold me on the fact of what people think of Hamilton, they think of a steel town, all that kind of stuff. But Westdale and the Mac campus is gorgeous. A great university experience, without question. So, yeah, and I had been to campus because I think the first year he went up, we drove him up to move him in and all that kind of stuff. So it was really my brother that was the decider in terms of influencing me to go to Mac.
You can admit it now. He invited you to a Purple Jesus party and told you everything that.
Purple Jesus! Oh my God! I haven't heard that in a long time. Wow, that brings back memories right there.
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny. At that point, did you even know there was university baseball being played? Because Dalhousie and McMaster both had teams the first year you played, and both were
I
good,
did not.
very good teams.
I did not actually. I had explored some options in the U.S. and some junior colleges and stuff like that, and had some interest, a couple different spots. But I decided to go. I didn't think I was making the bigs, so I decided to go the education route, if you will. So, I didn't, and I don't at the time. I just didn't equate Canadian universities to competitive baseball. Obviously, I was incredibly wrong in that assumption, but it just wasn't. It wasn't where my head was. So
Yeah.
no, I didn't. I did not realize, and I think that first year was the first year I was on campus. I think that was. Is it? I think that was the first year they had it, right? So Billy and
Yeah, it was kind of very informal. I wouldn't say informal. There were only 4 teams in Canada at that point. So
right, right.
Durham College and McGill and Guelph and Mac. And that's the very, very pioneering stage. And so
Mm-hmm.
tell me, what residence were you in, and what was university life like before there was baseball? Were you playing intramural sports and those kinds of
Yeah,
things, or were you just trying to get good marks in first year?
marks weren't a huge priority my first year, if I'm being honest with you. But yeah, I was. So I lived in Edwards Hall. I'm not. I think a couple of the other guys. I think Gibby and Hughes lived in Edwards after me. I just lived there for 1 year. It was the all male residence, so you can assume what that leads to. And funny again with my brother's influence, he when applied, you had two or three options I think that you could pick for residence. So he says, pick this one, this one, this one. The only thing you don't want is to get Edwards Hall, and that's the one I got. So, but you know what? Amazing. Created some amazing friendships there at Edwards. But that first year, yeah, it was really for me. Just I was away from home. I think I just went home at Christmas, right? Like a lot of people in Ontario go home on the weekends, and definitely at Thanksgiving and everything else. So there were 3 or 4 of us that were from away, if you will, and we kind of hankered down and were there for the full year, just to experience and grow up and mature. Played a lot of intramural sports. I mean, I stayed active, but none of it was, it was intramural sport. Not that that's not competitive, because you can make it competitive, but it's just not the same as a.
It's shocking sometimes how
Yeah.
good intramural sports are.
Yeah.
I played a little intramural basketball and, thought, oh, this is going to be great. Like I'll be able to just, you're taller than most and I played in high school. So I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And then I get there and it's, I'm of average size at 6'3", right? And you got guys that are bigger than that and really good basketball players and people who were stars on their high school team that, are nowhere near making the varsity team. So it's, I say this all the time, only 6% of people who play rep sports end up playing varsity. Like it's
Really?
a small
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a small percentage. So when you think of that in the context of a baseball team, 10% would be on a 25-man roster. That 10% would only be 2.5. So you got to remember that it's maybe like 1 or 2 people on your elite level rep teams that end up playing varsity sports because it's difficult to make it, and
Right.
so interesting so you have a pretty probably robust first year. And I like asking these questions because they're important for, kids and people that are coming into the schools. Did you have a favorite nightclub hangout? I mean, I spent some time in the downstairs John, probably not very aware of my faculties, but there's the Rat, and you guys have talked about the Thirsty Camel, which is a ridiculous combination laundromat pub somehow.
Yeah.
Only the truly demented could come up with that. But do you have a favorite spot or two that you would haunt in first year?
No question. Well, when you say first year, no, I did. So the John was, that was the spot you went on Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. That was the focal point, if you will. The Rat was The Rat was good, but it just wasn't what the John was. But and I believe I would have figured it out first year, but definitely throughout my career, like the Snooty Fox, which is a pub just down the road in Westdale. I mean, far too many hours spent in that pub. Far too many hours of Billy Newton spent in that pub with a lot of other guys too. But Newton and I always had a way of, why are the lights on? And it's like, oh yeah. So so the John definitely for campus, and the Snooty Fox was just a great Irish pub, kind of our speed, right? Sit back and drink some pints. Yeah.
Well, the fact that you and Newton are minor shareholders probably says quite a bit.
It does, yes.
So how do you become aware that there's a baseball team? I mean, and obviously, it's first year is a lot about discovering yourself, but what prompted the decision to discover the baseball team? And do you remember who told you or how you found out about it?
It's a great question, and I didn't know what questions you were going to ask me tonight, so I tried to think about that because I've watched some of the previous podcasts, and I'm like, I have no idea how I found out about the baseball team. I really don't, because I mean, I didn't know Billy. Well, I didn't know anyone when I went out for the ball team. So I think there might have been some type of connection with Don, and he had some East Coast guys, and they knew I was at Mac, but I'm not sure that that's true. Because I remember walking into the first tryouts, was it Alexander Park? Anyway, a dog track for a ball field, and I was, literally I knew no one. It's not like someone in the dorm said, "Hey, let's go." And I was living off campus my second year anyway, but there was no connection that I can really put my thumb on. To be honest with you, Mike.
Well, similar to the Andrew Tinish thing, Andrew at Brock just showed up at training camp, sight unseen. No one had seen him. You're a hell of a ball player to just walk onto a team, Craig Cooper. Let's just put it that way.
Well, I don't know. I guess, yeah. I'll take the compliment. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, of course. Do you remember your first interactions with the coaches? Like you obviously go to a tryout of some sort, and do you have an inclination? The team probably looks pretty good. To the naked eye, you get some great players who carry themselves wonderfully as ball players. But do you remember your first interaction with a coach? Was it with Hammer and Hank and one of his crazy drills, or was it with Coach Graves?
Yeah, no, I think it was more with Donnie. Hank would really gravitate towards catchers and infielders just because he loved hitting ground ball. He loved hitting fly balls too, but ground balls were definitely his thing. So I just remember being positive. I don't have specifics. I was saying to my wife and kids at supper, I'm like, this is how many years ago? I'm struggling to remember everything, obviously, that happened. But I remember from that first tryout, from the coach and from the player standpoint, I remember, okay, I'd played on, many teams in my time. I'm like, okay, there's talent here, unquestionably. And the coaches, and I would say almost, now that I think back as we keep talking, Donnie was almost like he always was. He was just that calm influence. Like, Don had his moments where he'd get wound up, but in general, he was just kind of, like the Godfather, right? He's like, hey, I want to make sure everything is in harmony so that, we do and we perform and everything at the best of our ability. So, yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's great. And obviously you make the team and, go through a year in 95 that, has a very competitive Brock team on the field and competitive U of T team. And you guys have this Hatfield and McCoy relationship with Durham College for whatever reason. And, but tell me a little bit about, what you thought of some of your teammates and some memories from your first couple of years, because 95 and 96 are very similar in some ways. And then we'll get obviously to your championship season, but a little bit about, just a little bit about your team.
Yeah, for sure. So personally, and then I'll talk about the team. Personally, I had a horrible year in my first year in 95. I pulled, almost completely tore I think it was my right hammy early in those cold October, September games. and I was just never the same, right? That's my back foot. I'm a right-handed hitter. I just could not leverage. I just, everything was off for me for 95. So I didn't have a good year personally. So that's on one side. Teammate wise, same thing I would say for all years, but if we keep it to the first 2 years, I just knew that we were talented. We had some gaps that first year, I would say, where we could improve. I think pitching was really hard. Quality pitching was really hard in those early years at Mac. Having said that, we had some good pitchers, just not the depth, right? You didn't have 4 quality starters. You might have had 1 or 2, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I remember that's the year Billy played my first year, right? So that's the year I really get to know Billy, and every catcher I've ever met, and no offense to you, and every left-handed pitcher I've ever met has been a little kooky, right? So, Billy.
Listen, that's not an insult. We all know it.
Okay,
it's par for the course.
It's a compliment, I think, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But so you got that element of kind of that Billy-ness, if you will. But we had such great players when you go to, Reese and Lenny. And they were great players and great people, but they weren't as boisterous, I'd say, as a Billy Newt, right? They were almost calming, and their leadership style was a little bit different, right? A lot of lead by example, and look at what I do, and look how I work, and all that kind of stuff. But it definitely felt like, again, I played on a lot of different teams, a lot of provincial teams and Canada games, all that kind of stuff. It felt like I was surrounded with guys that just wanted to play and wanted to win. And listen, if I'm around people like that, sign me up and I'll play every day of the week.
Yeah, no, it's leadership, and when I did my former head coach there, Coach McRae, he talked about leadership has different looks and different feels. And, and I played with Brad long enough to know that his way of leading was he would put on those work gloves, those ratty looking leather work gloves, and just go do extra BP. And that was his way of just showing that, for him, the joy was in the work. Billy was more vocal for sure, and a guy that would stir it up. And, but you need that sometimes when you're dealing with pitchers who, a lot of them are not wired like me. I frequently acknowledge that. A lot of them get in their own head. They think they need someone that's going to pump their tires, but at the same time fire them up at times and help them think through a game. And, I was more like a horse that you have to pull the reins on all the time. Like, whoa, what is that?
That's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's not everyone's cup of tea, Craig. I got to tell you, it's, some coaches want you to be, they want to call your pitches, or they want to have a sense of control out there. And that's a sense of calm on the team. And I was more a sense of fire for the team. It's like fiery, right? Fiery competitors,
right?
Yeah.
And you need a balance. You can't have 9 guys on the field all with that fire, because it will never work, right? So you need a balance of personality.
Yeah, it's too intense, I think. It's good for that, the day of death, as they used to call my starts, and then the 4 days when you're off the field, hopefully you have some guys that are a little more about, it's more relaxing, it's more of a process. But it sounds like you guys had a great blend of of people there. And so tell me a little bit about what changes in 1997. You're healthy, obviously, which is great.
Yep.
I know that you had a great year in in 96. You're starting to really get your stride, and we'll talk a little bit more about your experiences with provincial teams and Canada games here as we kind of talk about your baseball legacy. But do you really feel like you're at the peak of your powers in 97? Is that your best year you had?
Yeah, well, definitely one of my best, for sure. I mean, it's such a short season. That's the only thing I would, sustained success is the key in baseball, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I would say yes, just because we won, right? So forget about the personal stats or whatever, any of that stuff. I would have been happy hitting 250, winning that national title with that group of guys, quite frankly. I'm glad I didn't hit 250, but yeah, I mean, definitely one of my better, we can call it my best year of baseball for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember? It must have been exhilarating to finally beat Brock after a couple of years of coming so close and then just coming short. That's got to be frustrating. So, is that the most memorable rivalry you can remember? Is the games with Brock and how intense that uh, the
Yes.
corporate Big Blue was versus the kind of wild bunch. You guys were kind of more wild and a little more free flowing than the Brock group were for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an intense rivalry. Without question. I would say I'm trying to think in my head one that's more intense in my mind, and I can't think of one. So, yeah, Brock, those games, those were awesome, and there was, which is needed in those rivalries. I mean, we're all 30 years later now. We can all sit around and have a beer, but there was, I'm not going to say hatred, but there was a disdain for each other. It was mutual. I believe it was mutual from some of the back and forth. But I mean, that's what a good rivalry is, right? And I mean, I still remember. I've mentioned a bunch of times all the things I can't remember, but I still remember that weekend when we eliminated Brock to go that year to the Nationals, because it was a monkey off our back. We did it convincingly. Great games, very competitive games, but we did it, and we were on this roll for the entire season. And yeah, I mean, my worry going into Nationals was that it was going to be a little bit of a letdown, right? Because that was, in a lot of ways, our national championship. I would argue, whoever made it that year would have won nationals. And I don't like to compliment my competitors too much, but I do believe. I mean, you guys were a great squad as well. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to remember in a 4 or 5 year period that between Brock, Laval, Dalhousie, and McMaster, we won everything in Canada. Right? So Dalhousie was, at the finals in '95 when I went with the team. They won in '96. They were back in '97, and then didn't go in '98. But Mac just narrowly misses out because they only sent 2 teams from Ontario in '95. 96, you're there. '97, you guys win, and then that precedes then Brock winning a couple back to back, right? Like it's just all these teams, are all very much bringing out the best in each other. So as much as we all love the, Matt Fletcher and Henry yipping at each other and people getting very, very intense, the reality is that everyone brings out the best in each other. And that's super cool. So, tell me about how you wrap up your McMaster career. You win in '97, but you play obviously another year. And
No,
what
that
is
was
that
my
leading?
last year.
Okay, you retired on top. Good for you.
Yeah, That was the way to finish it, I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how do you wind up your academic career at McMaster, and what comes next for you?
Yeah, so obviously finished out that year with my kin, and I stayed in Hamilton right after school. So my thoughts at that time were I was going to do some grad work. I was leaning kind of towards physio. I really liked exercise physiology, but I wasn't sure. So I stayed in Hamilton, I should say. I actually played that summer after graduation in Dundas. We had a really good squad. Billy Newts played down there. Matty George, I don't know if you know that name, but we had some Korpanik. We had a really good team. Anyway, had some fun, but I worked in a physiotherapy office as a kinesiologist to get a feel. So I did that, I'd say, till January-ish. And then I decided to go travel. But I got the experience of physio, and it wasn't exactly what I was hoping it was going to be, quite frankly. So it kind of put some doubt in my mind if that's what I wanted to study as I, came back for grad school. But what I decided to do is go travel for a year. So packed up my bags all by myself and flew to Australia and lived there for a year. So pretty cool experience to say
Yeah.
the least. Again, love the ocean, love beaches. Australia is unique in the way that, like here at a beach in Nova Scotia, which we have hundreds, they're provincial parks or they're segregated. In Australia, the beach is Main Street, right? And everything builds around it. So it's just an incredible culture. Very active, right? They basically have 12 months of sunshine a year. Backpacked, lived in hostels, all that kind of stuff. And until I ran out of money, and then I had to get a real job. But still lived that lifestyle, but actually made some money so I could stay as long as I could. So that was amazing. Again, just maturity, growing up, experiencing something outside of Canada, right? I've been on a couple of vacations to that point in my life, but yeah, that was a really, really cool experience.
That's yeah. There's more to unpack there. Obviously, do you have a favorite experience from your year abroad in Australia?
So the people, I would say, like the people you meet there, great Aussies in general are great people. But it was really, I learned to surf there. Again, live on the ocean my whole life, but I'd never learned to surf. So that was really cool. At one point, I got a job at Pepsi, and I don't know how because I'm a backpacker, but they gave me a wagon, a company car, and I did a bunch of marketing stuff for them, and then it was like I would go home on the weekends, and it was like 8 surfboards in the back and 8 people cramped in it, and we would just go right and just live carefree for weekends at a time. That's pretty special from my perspective, because if you don't do it at that age, I mean, the next time you get to do stuff like that, I guess, is when you retire, if you're able to do it, right? Like that carefree, no responsibility, just live your life and enjoy. That's what resonates with me for Australia.
Amazing. Yeah, and great. So, what brings you back from Australia? Like, it seems like a pretty tempting thing to want to stay there, and I'm sure that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, very tempting. It was a work visa I was on, so to stay longer, you had to be. There was a quite the process to be sponsored and so on and so forth. And I think at that point I was like, okay, this is a great place, love the experience, but it was also whatever that flight is, right? It's a day's travel, call it, to get back home. And if I was going to start my life, I didn't want it to be, I guess, that far away from friends and family. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's good. So you load back up and you come back to Canada, and I'm sure your brother, in the meanwhile, has told everyone he was better at basketball than you.
That's right.
What? So you're now coming back to Canada with a blank slate. What?
Hmm.
How do you start writing the next chapter?
Well, I got a job. I got a job, and actually had my oldest daughter, Olivia, who is 24, almost 25. So you do that math. I had her very quickly after I came back from Australia. So threw a curveball, one of the best things that's ever happened, but it wasn't a planned experience, I guess you could say. So, that again grew me up very quickly, right? It's no longer myself I'm supporting, it's another human being. So I hit the job market. I worked here locally in Halifax for a little while, close to a year, if my memory serves me. And then I moved to Toronto, back up to Ontario. I got a job with PepsiCo up there, a really good job. So I moved up, lived in Toronto for about 5 or 6 years. Played 1 year with the Lennies up in Newmarket within that time frame. It just wasn't a good time in my life to be playing baseball, I would say. But yeah, and then again, that's when I spent 5 or so years up there, and that's when it's like, okay, how do I find the right career opportunity? And I was in sales, marketing, that type of stuff back here on the East Coast. And PepsiCo being a big company, I went from Pepsi bottling, so the Pepsi, the carbonated soft drinks. I came back here working for Quaker Tropicana Gatorade, which is a subsidiary or a sister company, and just kind of, I guess I stayed with them for close to 14, 15 years, different jobs, and you could jump around. Frito-Lay is part of that as well, so you could always kind of find good roles on the East Coast. I did that. Loved Pepsi. Great company, great products. I mean, I don't think anyone can deny the power, I guess, of some of their products. And then I took a leap of faith. I had a really good friend, mentor, if you will, that I worked with at Pepsi. He had left, had a startup company called Lorax Systems, which, the Lorax, the Dr. Seuss, same spelling, if you will, the defender of the environment. And it was all about oil valves and diesel fuel filtration and very technical and engineered stuff that I had never, touched in my life. I was there for damn near 8 years. Loved the experience, but again, a startup versus a tier one company, they're very different experiences. And then I had enough, and I moved on just here in the past couple of years to a new role.
Oh, that's exciting. And,
Yeah.
like you pivot, as coaches like to say, they got a 10-year voice, and then they kind of move on to a new challenge, and you kind of find that comfort zone. And it's a little bit like the three bears and the porridge, that one's a little too hot. It's a little too,
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting. Have you continued to play baseball, and or are you coaching, or like what's going on in terms of the diamond?
In terms of baseball, when I did play, I played senior a couple of years when I came back, so the senior league down here, and then just became too much. It was a lot during the week, a lot of travel. So then there's an intermediate league, which would be one step below that. And I actually went back to my hometown, Bridgewater. Sean Woodworth, one of the guys I mentioned earlier on, that when I was growing up, that coached and played with, he started a team. So I played intermediate for, I don't know, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years, probably my early to mid to late 30s. Within that time frame, we won a championship, a provincial championship. Really good ball down here in general. The Valley and the So Shore were just always hubs of baseball. So did that, and then again, life, young kids. So I have two other children: Cole, who's 14 now, and Quinn, my youngest daughter, who will be 12 next month. So that just became more of the focal point. So I retired. I'm going to say I was 37-ish, maybe. I was getting up there anyway. So I retired, and then I've coached on and off, I would say, between all the sports the kids play in their younger years. I find as they get older, I almost want a different voice to be coaching them, because I'm still, like, I'll take Cole as an example, my oldest son. He's really into basketball. So, I mean, I'll go out and we'll play, in the yard, and we'll, 4 or 5 days a week, we're out there playing. I can give him all the guidance he needs from me out there. And I think another voice, another adult authority figure, he'll learn more for, just the way I see it. So as they get older, I pull back from coaching, but I do enjoy, I enjoy more the skill and the development, the fundamentals. That's kind of the way my head works. So I try to get it in early, if you will.
No, it's great. And, that's the kind of natural course of things, right? It's a lot of parent coaching when they're young, and then that gives way to, maybe more skilled, or people have coaching levels or certifications and that kind of stuff. You mentioned before that, baseball's you're kind of in a baseball hotbed out there, because there's a lot of baseball that comes out of the East Coast. But one of the key questions you have to ask anyone who is from anywhere pretty much from about East Quebec on is, are you a Red Sox fan or a Jays fan?
Neither. I was going to comment on your hat as soon as this started and say, okay, I'm out. But so I'm not a Red Sox fan. I'm a Yankees fan, actually.
So this this is a this is
Not a good
a
answer for you, I
Blue
know.
Sox team because we have a couple guys from the East Coast on
Oh, I
my
didn't.
slow
Okay.
pitch team who are a huge Red Sox fan, and then we have a bunch that are also Jays fans. So to pacify everybody on our
That's
team,
cool.
we came up with the Blue Sox. And anyone who knows the education system, I kept saying you should change it to the Blue Pages, which is where all the scandals get printed. But
Yeah,
yeah, no, it's tons of fun, and being a Yankee fan, you must draw the ire of a lot of locals because
I do.
there's a ton of Red Sox fans because they get mostly the games on television there, right? That was a thing back in
Well,
the day.
yeah, that's how a huge majority of the East Coast is Red Sox because that's all you could watch. You couldn't get Jays games back in the day, so lots of Red Sox. I mean, and I will say when I was really young, like the Jim Rice and the Darrell Evans and like those Red Sox, I definitely have good memories of liking them. But my dad was a Yankees fan, loved Reggie Jackson. It just goes from there, right? You follow a lot of the leads of your parents, as we all know. So yeah.
Well, it's not a team that hasn't, that's on a, that's not, they won, they won, and they've had some Hall of Fame
Yeah,
players. Of late, they're maybe a little bit underachieving, but, when Joe Torre was the manager, that was a great squad with Derek Jeter.
Corey, Jeter, Bernie. I mean, Paul O'Neill, like Posada, I don't. I could talk about this for hours, but that is my type of Yankee team. Not a lot of those were homegrown, right,
Yeah,
up
of
the
course.
middle. Which a lot of people just say, the Yanks buy everything, but no, Rivera. I can't forget Rivera.
Bernie
Sorry,
Williams.
like
How can anyone forget Bernie Williams, the center fielder, right?
Bernie was incredible, right? Underrated, incredible hitter. Anyway, so yeah, I have still a huge Yankees fan, as you can tell. We actually, you know what? We dropped our first series yesterday to the Jays, but dramatic comeback just before I jumped on this call. We won in the ninth, so that's good. So you didn't answer. Are you a Red Sox or a Jays fan?
No, I'm a Jays fan, and
Okay.
I was a Jays fan before Brock graduate Andy Tinnish went to work there, but it's because I grew up in Oshawa, Ontario. It was easy for us to skip school and hop on the GO train and go sit in the grandstand at
Right.
Ascension Stadium. So always a Jays fan, and then I think I've had some unique privileges to be able to get on the field with the Jays in Pittsburgh and St. Louis and a few other places.
Cool.
It's professional baseball players people don't understand just how massive these people are. Up close. I remember meeting R.A. Dickey, who doesn't look like the biggest guy out there, right? He throws a knuckleball.
No, he doesn't. Yeah.
But he's a giant guy. And, I'm not used to being intimidated by people's size because I'm 6'3" and 240.
Right.
So, it's typically not something that resonates, but I've always just marveled at the size of Major League Baseball players. Mark McGwire, I remember in '92, Ted Jenner and the VP of Brock at the time, and I had tickets to the American League Championship Series when the Jays were playing Oakland. And Mark McGwire, those 3/4 length shirts that you used to get to play ball that would just come over the elbow?
Yeah.
His wouldn't fit over his elbow. They were shredded from below the tricep because he was just so massive and huge, and so yeah, it's pretty cool from that perspective. So Craig, let me ask you a couple of interesting questions about life in Atlantic Canada. Myth or non-myth, the kitchen party in the out in Nova Scotia, is this something that you've had the pleasure of seeing, and does it actually happen, or is this just an urban myth that's been spread in the rest of Canada?
100% true. 1,000% true. Yeah, the kitchen party. Have I experienced it? I'm not going to say weekly because I don't. But we have a pretty close knit group of friends in our neighborhood, and so typically at least one day on a weekend, more in the summertime when it's nice out, but we'll be on a back deck. But even when we start poolside or on a back deck, we always end in the kitchen. And the kitchen party is very real, very fun. And if you haven't done it, you have to experience it without question. Yeah. It's just mostly just standing around an island, drinking and listening to music. But I don't know, name something better than that.
Yeah, that's true. Now you've also got to experience some pretty good nightlife. I hear Halifax is just a great place to go visit and have a good time. How would you rank the Halifax? And you would have seen Australia, and I know that you guys, Hamilton is going to be underrated. Anywhere there's a laundromat / pub is aces in my books. But how would you rate Halifax as a place that's got some great live music and some classic pubs?
Yeah, very, very high. Top three in my mind. Not that I, indulge in downtown Halifax that much anymore. And it's changed a lot, obviously, over the years. But I mean, Halifax Harbor is beautiful. So downtown Halifax is five or six streets, probably 5 or 6 blocks. And it's just all restaurants and bars, essentially, right? And a lot of live music, a lot of really cool Irish, Scottish bars, English bars, or pubs, I should say, for those ones. But what makes it so unique is we have so many university kids in Halifax. So that downtown core can survive and be very vibrant, 12 months of the year. Because in the summer we have our tourism, and in the winter and fall, there's Dalhousie, St. Mary's, King's College, Mount St. Vincent. I'm forgetting a bunch, but I go on and on. It's just a really cool vibe, and it's all walkable, which makes it really good as well, obviously. But I've partied in a lot of cool cities. I'm trying to think when I compare to Halifax. I'm not sure. Yeah, no, Halifax. I'm going to say Halifax is my number one. That should be my answer anyway. Maybe Sydney was pretty cool. Not maybe. Sydney was obviously a really cool vibe. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Halifax.
Well,
Number one.
I think you've managed to avoid getting run out of town on a rail now, so that's good. Because if you would have answered Sydney, they may have shipped you to Australia. Craig, listen, you've played some very high level ball. We didn't really touch on, Canada games or some of your other ball experiences. So I want to frame it. Tell me the differences between, both your position on the team and what you learned and how it helped you in life. How would you compare McMaster to your high-end senior experience or your experiences at the Canada Games?
That's a tough one, I'll be honest with you. Because all of those teams would have incredibly talented people, obviously, right? Like from 1 to 9 and your staff, and 1 to 20, however many guys are on the team, were all talented. So that would be the same. I think the major difference for Mac was we were more of the provincial teams, or any of those provincial teams, you came together, you practiced, you had a couple training camps, you played some exhibition games, and then you went to the national tournament and you played. You didn't have enough time to bond, or, chemistry is, of any team sport, chemistry is pretty darn close to one of the top things that you need, right? And we had that at Mac because we didn't just, we came together, we didn't live all together, but we were together all the time, on campus, off campus, in classes together, all that kind of stuff. So we had this incredible chemistry and bond. And that really was one of the special things that made Mac, all of those Mac teams, but especially 97, so incredible. because there weren't guys that were like, oh, I didn't get to start today, or oh, I didn't get to pitch today if you were a reliever or whatever. No, we really had, it's like, oh, wow, you went, it was just a team concept, and that chemistry was incredible. Without question, the best team chemistry I've probably had on any team in my life.
Well, and 30 odd years later, or close to 30 years in some cases, going to be all getting back into uniform, and part of that is going to be disgraceful because we have to be sponsored by St. John's Ambulance, but but part of it is a reflection of just how many lives your former teammate Brad Reason touched. Tell me a little bit about just some maybe moments that you shared with Brad that people wouldn't know about, particularly his parents, because they'll be omnipresent at the weekend, and we'll obviously want to help keep Brad, the memory of what Brad stands for as an example of how to be a great McMaster player is something that I really believe in. So tell me a little bit about things you remember of him as a teammate or as a person.
Yeah, so again, just to restate it, I think I've said it, but phenomenal, just human being, forget about teammate, just a phenomenal person. And, Brad and I were always, I don't know that we were the tightest or the closest on the team, but we always had this mutual respect for one another. And that's what when I think of Brad, peel back the talent and everything else, because that's a given in my mind. But it was always just this mutual respect that, we both had. I knew that what Brad wanted to do was win. And that didn't mean he was going to go 4 for 4 and turn 3 double plays or whatever, whatever. He just wanted our team to win. And I had the exact same goal. So we had this mutual connection, from my perspective, that we were just aligned on team success. And the other thing that I think Brad and I were very, very similar on, and we've had these conversations on the side, because we're both leaders that aren't incredibly vocal. Sometimes I can get a little hot if in the heat of the moment, but in general, it was like, we led by example, I think is the better way to say it. And Billy Newts, who doesn't lead, I'm not going to say he doesn't lead by example, but he leads by yelling at you or motivating you, is the better way to say it. Brad, he was always on Brad and I. You guys got to be more vocal. You guys got to do this is the lead. And so Brad and I would have those conversations on the side. It's like, okay, well, what should we actually be doing? And I mean, at the end of the day, did Billy push us to be better leaders and more vocal at certain times? Absolutely, which was welcomed. But at the end of the day, Brad and I were just like, hey, let's play our game. Let's, bring the team along and do what we got to do. But we just had that mutual respect for one another. Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question properly or not, but
it really does. But it reminds me of something that I think came up in the very second, maybe McMaster podcast that I did with Todd Huther, which I think he was telling me that you and Billy used to get into it pretty good on occasion. Like you would just push back on him, and maybe you guys even got into a bit of a fracas after a bar night. Does that sound like you're in Billy's relationship sometimes? Would you push back when he was getting in your face a bit?
I did. Yeah, absolutely. Many times, even beyond, outside of the ball field, because he was in your face and I was a little more incredibly competitive and intense, but more laid back in how I portrayed it. And he took that as I wasn't in it, right? And I'm a very strong, opinionated person as well, I guess. Stubborn. So when someone says that to me, I mean, that's, you're calling me out. So yeah, we had I'm not sure. I have one story, which is one of my favorites, and it's probably not applicable for this
sure
podcast, because it is.
Oh yeah.
Well, so Billy and I, again, antagonistic. That was the kind of still to this day. I texted him before I jumped on the podcast, but we just always had this. And he was a Jays fan. I'm a Yankees fan. He hated me for that. We would drink at the Snooty Fox and debate everything in the world and talk about sports till, again, the lights came on. It's like, oh shit, why are the lights on? So there's one, him or Lisa are gonna kill me for telling this story, his wife, but and this is 30 years ago, so take it in context. So we leave the Snooty Fox. This is Billy's first year coaching. So he's got a car, he's got a job, all this other stuff. So we close the Fox, or close it and then some. And out of our ultimate wisdom, we jump in Billy's car. It's maybe a 2-minute drive. So why not walk it, right, as you think back? But anyway, we jump in his car. We are so heated still from our conversation inside. We get 10 feet out of the parking lot. Billy pulls over on the side of the road, and I'm telling you, we are just arguing over nothing, essentially, probably for 10 minutes. Then we go another 20 feet, and we argue for another 5. Anyway, eventually, safe and sound, we get home. And Billy is living with Lisa at this point, and she's living with other people off campus. Lisa's still in school. We get home. It's 4 a.m. by now. It's got to be, right? So we get in, and Billy loves old school music. I don't know if you know about him, but he loves the Eagles, right? He loves
Fleetwood Mac is a big fan. He's a big fan.
Yeah. So he loves all these old school music. So it's 4 a.m, and we're buddies again by this time. So he's like, "Cool, I need a beer." I'm like, "Yeah, let's have some." He's like, "Okay, I'm just gonna go put on some Kenny." So he goes over back in the CD era, throws in Kenny Rogers' greatest hits. And he cranks it. I'm talking as loud as this stereo will go. It's 4 a.m. I think it's exam time too. Oh yeah. So Lisa, the room was upstairs. Lisa comes downstairs again, whatever time of night it was, morning, and says, "Billy, what the fuck are you doing?" And Billy's up drinking a beer. I'm sitting on the couch drinking beer. And Billy's dancing. He's like, "Please, just listen to some Kenny," as he, dances around. And anyway, I think the ending of all of that was Billy getting so mad that he pulled the CD out of the CD player and threw it in the toilet and tried to flush it down. Again, he's gonna kill me that I tell this story, but it was classic. It's classic Billy and I's relationship. I'll be honest with you. I mean, best of buddies. Well, that night and the next morning, but we were very different personalities that really kind of butted heads at times.
Yeah, you know what? That's the essence of great friendships. A lot of times you bring out the best and
Agreed.
worst in each other, and just you egg each other on. It's I talk quite frequently about that Brad Reeson and I are polar opposites, and
right.
So he was always he's a very careful guy. People don't understand that. He was pretty careful and didn't like to step out on that ledge too much. And, I'd be the guy sitting there hanging off the edge of a building going, "Oh, look at the view. It's great." And, so I'd always try to push Brad to do crazy things and, break out a little bit of a shell. Yeah. And he'd try to reel me in. So I think that's always a great symptom. That's, it would be, could you imagine a world where everyone was like Bill Newton? Like you just couldn't. There's no way the world will not be functional, but just an amazing guy. And I'm glad that you guys have that special relationship. So, I'm sure you heard in his podcast that for whatever reason, he's decided to start sipping tequila like some weird Toronto socialite. And we all know that Billy is, he's hardcore. He's kind of Niagara Falls. And, I very much appreciate that about him. He's a real guy and a real person. So, Greg, do you maintain any relationships outside of Billy that you've kept up for the last 25 or 30 years? And is there anyone that you really kind of miss and you're looking forward to having that for cracking that first beer with after we survive the movie night and the round table stuff where we're going to be telling a lot of stories like the one you just did that we can't put on, on
Right.
video. Do you have a couple teammates that you really kind of miss and you're kind of curious about
Yeah.
because you haven't seen them?
Yeah. So Brett Arms, we used to a little lately. I mean, I can't even put a timeline to it, but we used to stay in contact quite a bit, and that's kind of waned off a little bit here and there. We had our reunion a few years ago now, so that kind of rekindled some of those. Damn, I really miss this guy. That type of thing, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, again, I won't go to nudes. Arms, absolutely love that guy. I'd love to see him again. He's a Yankee fan as well. Doug Lenny. I mean, love Doug. Well, I
There's a
liked
funny
everyone on the team,
observation
but
on Doug, though, right? So, you tell me if I'm right on this one, right? Like Doug always has this big warm smile, and he looks like the friendliest guy in the world. And the thing is, him and my daughter played against his daughter in hockey, and Reed plays at Brock, so you guys will have to flog Doug for that.
I'm not cool
But
with that, by the way. Yeah.
no, and the funny thing is that he just looks so like he just looks like the friendliest guy. You just want to have a beer with him, but he's a killer competitor, and
No question.
like that part is always so deceiving with me. I mean, I think I kind of look the part, other than me laughing at a lot of what you knuckleheads say all the time. I kind of look the part of a pitcher that is kind of mean, right? So at the end of the day, that's kind of par for the course. Doug doesn't look the part, but he is a vicious competitor, and you'd never guess it, right? He's just easygoing a lot of the time. And,
so you're bang on. So easygoing, great, warm smile, like he's, a Mormon almost at times, right? It's like, this guy's just really nice. Yeah, then you play ball, you play with him. I had the pleasure of playing with him, never against him. Yeah, I mean, he's got a fire in his belly without question. I mean, the games he gutted out on the mound, that's what really shows it, right? I mean, he was a great infielder as well. I'm not taking that away from him, but my God, the games and the innings and the pitches, the pitch counts, and going on short rest, like that guy is, he's a gladiator. It doesn't look like it. I mean, I don't even know how tall Doug is, but he's not a big guy. He's not he's not a muscular guy, but God damn. And you know what? I've never faced Doug, which is interesting as well from a hitting perspective, right? I'm not sure I'd want to, but I'd want to, but
of course you would.
Yeah, he's hats off to that guy without question.
Yeah, and I think that defines the McMaster team, right? I think the contrast is what makes the rivalry so good.
Mm-hmm.
To a certain extent, Brock always looks the part. You got big, tall, kind of rangy guys for the most part. If you look at Andy Tinish or Rick Bottomley,
Tinish, yeah.
They kind of look the part. The pitchers kind of look the part, and Mac was just so deceptive, right? Like, other than you guys had all these killers, but that were disguised as. I remember Jeff Lounsbury coming up to me, and I said to him, "You just don't let Brad Reeson beat you. Like, just pitch around him. Like, don't allow that to happen." And he said to me, "Well, it doesn't look like much." Well, that was a doubleheader before we were going to Montreal, and 5 for 6 later, and 2 or 3, it's like, I told you so. Like, I played with them long enough to know. And you guys had a lot of that kind of player. You had a lot of guys that were just vicious competitors, but very nice people and deceptive from that perspective.
I agree with you, but I think the other part with take Reese, great hitter, pitch around Reese. Well, I mean, you talk about the other guys I want to see, right? So you pitch around Reese. Okay, well, so is it Husey that you're facing? Is it Pino that you're facing? Is it me that you're facing? Like, you're not pitching around. And I think that was a misconception with Doug Lenny. Like, if you're pitching around guys on your team, the next guy's going to hurt you.
Yeah.
in that 97 team. That's how special it was. Because yeah, we just had that great balance and unassuming guys that don't look like Brad Reeson. If you've never met Brad and you just went to the ballpark for the first day, you wouldn't think he's going to go 5 for 6 with 3 doubles, right?
No.
You wouldn't. He doesn't look like that. He looks like a middle infielder, and middle infielders don't rake like that, right? So, yeah, it's.
But the best part about Reeson, though, is, and I made fun of him for 20 years for this. He looks like he should have run faster than he could. You know, I used to say to him, I don't understand. You have like 2% body fat, but you don't run very fast in a straight line. Like you guys would have
true.
been, but he was quick. If that makes any sense, he was not fast, but he was quick. His reflexes were great and all that stuff. But, I just made fun of him for years because he had that weird, very straight up running style and he just didn't go very fast. It was crazy. Craig, amazing. And, it was great to kind of hear a little bit of, your reflections on that. What kinds of things do you want to get accomplished in the next, 4 to 5 years? What does life look like for you moving forward? Because you've made some courageous choices. You've been a bit of a globetrotter. Is there things that you still want to get checked off on life's to-do list?
That's a really good question. At this point in my life, it's all about my kids and my family at this point, right? So it's supporting them, allowing them to get the opportunities that I think, or just allowing those opportunities to be there for them, and whatever that means, whether that's academically, athletically, just overall happiness. That's really where I am at this point in my life. Hopefully retire at a decent age, so that I can, enjoy I'm not Twilight yet, but my older years, and that to me is being part of all of my kids' families and all that kind of stuff. So, now, and I say that, my buddy just the other day we were together, and he's like, he's playing over 45. There's an over 45 baseball league here. And he's like, Cooper, you got to play. And I've played with him for years and years. And I'm like, yeah, but I tore my Achilles about a year and a half ago, I've just knees down. I've just had so many injuries, and I feel it now, right? As you age, I'm like, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, a day later, I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm going to play ball again, right? Because he gets in my head and those competitive juices go. But anyway, I may dabble, but my goal now is, take care of my family, enjoy that.
Said to my girls, you'll see me one more time in a baseball. Like I play slow pitch, which is not the same. Okay, let's be honest. No. It's it's fun and it's very recreational, even though we're competitive. And but I think my kids will get to see me one more time, which is in about 8 months' time in St. Catharines. That'll be it. They'll get to see some horrible facsimile of what I used to be. But at least, I freely admit it. I don't think I'm going to be able to, throw like I did when I was in I played till I was 35 and, never had an arm injury, never had anything. And I can still throw a ball really quite well today. But the problem is, like you, it's everything below my hips that are destroyed. I've had 3 knee surgeries and, I have no ACL in my left knee, and all that kind of stuff is, all caused by recreational slow pitch, which is the death of me. I should have just stayed playing competitively, but it's, we want to give our kids and our spouses and our families, a chance to kind of relive that moment and do some good while we're at it. It's, the reality is your legacy, I think, is probably murmured a little bit, right? Like you're one of the better provincial players that have come from the East Coast. And the East Coast, they tend to really treasure the people that do well, that come from and your home back home. So of course people are going to ask you to play ball again. And, they're it's going to be just an ongoing thing. When there's an 80 and over league, you'll be tapped on the shoulder and you'll run out there with your walker. But I think the opportunity to do this, it probably as we look back, one of the peaks of our competitive lives, and just so much change. We're young men growing into our adult shoes at this point, I think is special and something that's great to be, shared. So I'll make sure that, hopefully we can get Coach Graves, who's contemplating a trip to Europe in and around September there. Hopefully we've scheduled it in such a way that he can attend. And there's probably at this point, we have so many East Coast people that might be coming up in a big magic bus at this point. We've got a guy in Florida. There's obviously Adam Dusky in Connecticut.
Where's Dusky? Still in Connecticut?
Yeah, he's in Connecticut. He's pretty juiced up and fired up. He's like, of course.
Ralphie's still in the U.S., isn't he?
Yeah.
Isn't Ralph still in the US?
Yeah. That's kind of what held it up a couple of years ago, was there was so many complications due to COVID that none of the U.S. folks could come over. Our first head coach, Mike McRae's coaching in Virginia. If they can't get here, then it kind of takes away 25, 30. We can have one or two that don't show up because, maybe there's something in life that comes up. But when you're talking about key people that can't attend because of regulations put in to prevent, obviously going through COVID, it's a bit tough. So really looking forward to it, and, kind of looking forward to our own kitchen party, but
I like it.
St. Catharines. Greg, thank you so much for today, and we'll see you soon.
Appreciate it, Mike. Thank you very much. Take care.
Well, the smell